Good evening and welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. We're getting started. I'm seeing people coming into the room. Great. I see you, Sarah. Hello, good evening. Wonderful. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the 2021 annual gathering of the Duke Forest Teaching and Research Laboratory here at Duke University. My name is Blake Tedder. I'm the Assistant Director of Engagement with the Office of the Duke Forest, and I'm really delighted that you all are here to learn about this awesome, dynamic teaching and research asset for Duke and for our community. First, let's just go over a few housekeeping items before we dive in and before our Director Sara Childs shares her wonderful presentation about the past, present, and future of the Duke Forest. Okay, let's see. First, this event is being recorded. So if you need to leave at any point or your Wi-Fi goes out, don't worry. We should have a copy available probably next week if the tech gods allow. Hope so. We will have time at the end for questions and answers. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. It may be at the top. It just depends on what device you're using. You may want to check that out. You can use that feature to submit a question at any time, and by the end, I'll try to pull as many questions as we can and present them to Sarah, and we'll get to as many as we can. Also at the end, there'll be a short survey about what kinds of engagement activities you'd like to see out on the forest. We really hope and anticipate a return to a more normal slate of tours and activities in 2022. Let's hope so. And so we'd really like to know what interests you. This is also an opportunity to share any notes to our staff or give any feedback about the presentation tonight. It will pop up automatically, and please note we may not respond, or we probably won't respond because all of the comments will be anonymous. So feel free to submit something there. All right. Oops. Let's advance that. All right, we do wish we were in person with you. Let's just be clear about that up front. We would be at the New Hope Improvement Association Community Building on Whitfield Road, or the Forest History Society's great new building. We have had so many wonderful annual gatherings at these places. Our staff really love the annual gathering, and it's the highlight of the year for all of us. It really is. We love to be near so many people who love to learn about the Duke Forest and engage in conversations about the work we do and see our old friends and meet a bunch of new friends. Sometimes being out on this big forest, it can be kind of lonely at times. And it's just great to have people in our lives that are interested in the work that we do and keeping this land base up and running. So yeah, we wish we were together, and hopefully we'll get back to it next year. That is the plan, and we're all putting that intention out there. So let's hope. But for tonight, though, Sarah and I can't see anybody on the call. So we're going to imagine that you are gathered together with us like the rapt audience you've been in the past, and think of you in these ways. And in these pictures, we see some of our favorite people, and we know a lot of you are on this call. So while we're talking about you, we'd like to actually hear from you and to know who's joining in with us tonight. We had about 200 people register, and not quite that is on the call yet, but that's okay. Still, we'd like to know who is here. So we're going to send out a couple of polls to find out. These are quick one-question polls to get a sense of who's here. So let's start with your connection to the forest. Who is here today? And you'll see a poll that has just popped up. And this is a long list, so you may have to scroll down to see all of the options, but Duke faculty, Duke staff, Duke student, current Nicholas School student, Duke alumni, neighbor, recreational visitor. You can select a couple, I believe. For example, I am Duke staff, but I am also a recreational visitor to the forest. Seeing the numbers come in. Oh, this is great. Wonderful. Okay, finish up in about 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see who's with us tonight. We have some Duke faculty, some Duke staff, some current students. a lot of alumni, which is wonderful, a lot of Nicholas alumni, and a lot of forest neighbors, and a lot of recreational visitors. That's wonderful. So glad to see you here. Okay, let's do another poll. Where are you calling in from? Are you, and this is a single choice, are you calling in from Durham City or out in Durham County, Chapel Hill, Carrboro, Orange County, Alamance County, North Carolina? And remember, you can scroll down if you don't see these other ones, another state, or actually calling in internationally. We have a lot of forestry alums who are living out in the out other places other than North Carolina, but we see a lot from international. So perhaps there are some. Great. Okay, 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see who's with us. We've got a lot of folks from Durham, a lot of folks from Orange County. Great. No one internationally this time. That's all right. Wonderful. Great. It's great to see all of you here. And we got a feeling we know who a lot of you are on this call, because we have some annual gathering regulars. And speaking of that, the last poll is we want to see how many annual gatherings you've actually been to over the years. So is this your first time? Have you come once before? 2 to 5 times? Are you an old timer? Forgive the phrase, 5 or more times. And have you been to all of them? Some of you have, for sure. All right, the answers are coming in. I'm really happy to see one of these answers that's coming through. Okay, closing the poll. All right, thank you all for participating. This is great. Okay, here's who's here. We've got a lot of first timers. This is wonderful, really wonderful. And to be sure, first timers, when we do this again, we will serve you wine and cheese and little snacks and have great conversations with you, because that's really a big part of why we love the annual gathering. Sorry tonight, I hope you've got a glass of wine or something sitting by you. Well, we've certainly got a lot of our quote unquote old timers too. So glad that you all are here. Wonderful. Let me see, I'll stop this poll. Thank you all for participating in that. That's wonderful, thank you. And we do want to send a special message out of just gratitude to any veterans who are on the call. You know, this is Veterans Day evening, and thank you for your service to our country and for the freedoms that we all enjoy. I urge all of you out there to check out our YouTube channel and to see the video we produced last fall, or maybe it was this spring. All of these dates are running together, really. We produced a video, it might have even been this summer, I can't quite remember, of how the Duke Forest is used as a regular training ground for Duke, UNC, and NC Central ROTC cadets. It is a really exciting video, and it's an exciting insight into a way that the forest is used for teaching that most people don't have access to. So it's really wonderful. So thank you to our veterans, and yeah, much appreciated. Okay. This is our wonderful team and our intern. This is a very special event for us as we're beginning to wrap up a whole year of celebrating the 90th anniversary of Duke Forest. What a special year for this incredible place. As many of you know, COVID-19 made last year and this year really difficult in many ways for everyone, us included. And our work has really continued in earnest. Our office staff were mostly working at home and going in on an as-needed basis, while our field team, for the most part, has been working full-time on the ground, maintaining these incredible 7,000 acres. While the world of work and the economy stopped and started and stopped and started and stopped and started again, the forest kept growing. It didn't stop and start. You know, forests tend to grow. That's what they do. And forest infrastructure needed our attention the whole time. So our team has been very busy. And while teaching and research activities from the university, you know, were initially non-existent at time, they ramped up significantly. And when Duke and partnering institutions came online, you know, we had a full slate of teaching and research activities to tend to. So much of the life of the Duke Forest that many in the public don't see has been largely and thankfully unaffected by the pandemic. There has certainly been challenges, especially for our engagement activities, but you know, the forest is plugging along and our team is going along with it. We would really like to thank our incredible team. Many of you know our team personally. You see us out in the forest. Beverly Burgess in the middle, our administrative assistant. Tom Craven on the left is our forest supervisor. Craig Hughes on the right is our maintenance technician. Sara Childs, of course, our fearless and peerless director, who you will be hearing from soon, is there to the right of Bev. Of course, I'm to the left of Bev, and our wonderful forest intern, Haley James, is pictured below. We have a really wonderful team, and our amazing team has been committed to this awesome land base. It's really wonderful to be part of such a committed team. And we've been maintaining this land base to incredible standards and sustainable ones at that, right? Just last month, I'm happy to announce that we received a 2021 Forest Stewardship Council Leadership Award, which celebrates, and I'll quote, forest owners, builders, architects, retailers, paper mills, manufacturers, environmental organizations, and many others who contribute to the movement towards responsible sourcing and forest management. We have been audited to FSC standards since 2001, that's 20 years, and we are honored to be recognized for our team's hard work and dedication in managing a sustainable and dynamic land base. So wonderful to our team. Thank you to our field team and to everybody that's involved in this wonderful, wonderful award. All right, just a few more things from me before I hand it over to Sara. I want to point out that this wonderful 90th anniversary has come with a lot of celebration from us. Many of you have probably seen a lot of the things we produced. The work of the forest is ongoing and forging ahead. In its 90th year, we have produced a lot of material that is great to view and to really remember why the forest is so important. So many of you have seen in our newsletters, we've been highlighting important events from each decade. Our staff produced a fun birthday message with some choreography included. I won't say it's great choreography, but it's still, you know, it's our version of choreography. The Nicholas School of the Environment produced a wonderful 15-minute mini documentary that was celebrating the legacy of the forest and the teaching and research that's happened here. And we're so happy to announce that at the end of this year, Duke University Communications will be putting out a highly produced mini documentary in their Duke Origins series that features the forest. We are really excited about this because we have been out in the field behind the camera with this team for the better part of a year. And we've been taking them all over the forest to take beauty shots and drone shots and talking with our team and riding along with our team. So this is going to be awesome. And right around the holidays, at the end of the year, really, this is going to come out. So we can't wait to see it and share it with you. We're also excited that a very special edition of the Duke Forest Log will be coming out next week. Many of our donors will receive that in the mail. And I guess everyone on our newsletter list will receive their digital copy soon. So that's great. You can see all of this and much more at dukeforest.duke.edu/90th if you'd like to see. And of course, I must mention, we are really excited about this, and we've been talking about it for a while. We finally have some gear that we'd love to share with you. We partnered with Duke Stores to create some limited edition 90th anniversary merchandise with our commemorative logos. You can order these now for holiday gifts, but please know supplies are really limited and we're probably not ordering more of these. So if you would like some, please order them, and now's a good time to get ready for your holiday gifts. And do know that our logo is probably going back to the Duke blue next year. So these commemorative logos will be part of the archive of this 90th anniversary. So get those. You can go to dukeforest.duke.edu/90th to get the link for those. Okay. Now, before I hand it over to Sara, I want to share a short video with you from Duke University President Vincent Price, which was released on July 1st this year. the forest's actual 90th birthday. Let's see. Okay.
Since James B. Duke and William Preston Pugh first dared to see a university in the near wilderness of pine and pasture, the Duke Forest has been a vital and beloved component of our university. Today, I'm thrilled to join in the celebration of the forest's 90th birthday. The story of the forest is one of growth and evolution. First founded as the Duke Forest Teaching and Research Laboratory, this extraordinary tract was the working and research land for the first forestry school in the American South, Duke School of Forestry. The forest became a core component of what is now the Nicholas School of the Environment and continues to be an asset for the entire university, with teaching and research lands extending across 3 counties containing over 7,000 acres. Today, the Duke Forest is shaping how the world understands forests, contributing to our understanding of climate change and serving as a laboratory for groundbreaking research of tomorrow. The forest has become a vital refuge for nature, providing clean water and clean air and a critical natural resource, protecting plants and wildlife and connecting threatened habitats. I also know firsthand how important the forest is to our community. My wife Annette and I enjoy walking our dogs on its trails and witnessing how the land is living and responding to our changing world. Please help me celebrate this incredible milestone of 90 years of the Duke Forest. Go and take a walk in the forest, read about its history, and share in our pride that when we walk under its towering pines, we can say, "This is Duke."
Okay, I've got little goosebumps. I don't know about you. I love that video. Thank you, President Price, for filming that, and for all the people who took part in all of the wonderful shots that we saw. Thank you to everyone for that. So now you're excited. I know, me too. This evening, we're also really excited to share with you a very special presentation about the history and the formation and the future of the Duke Forest. This is a story that many of you have heard parts of before, and for many of you, this will be all new information, especially those who are just joining us for the first time at an annual gathering. Either way, you're really in for a treat. If you are a Duke student or a Duke alumni or live in this area, the story of the Duke Forest is a fascinating one that includes you. So we do hope you will include the forest in your lives and join the Friends of the Duke Forest by supporting the Duke Forest Improvement Fund with a gift of $50 or more before the end of this big milestone year, and help keep moving this wonderful forest forward. We all love this dynamic forest, and knowing its history and anticipating its future only endears us to it more. When we walk through those woods, it's lovely to understand all the history and all the potential that it has. So remember, please submit any questions to me as they come up in the Q&A, and Sarah will try to answer as many as she can at the end. And I'm really delighted to turn it over to Sarah now, the Duke Forest Director, Sara Childs. Thank you.
Okay. Get us set up here. Okay, great. Blake, thank you so much for that introduction and all of that wonderful information about the forest that you shared. I feel like President Price really delivered my whole presentation, but in 2 minutes. So it was really wonderful. And maybe I can give you a little bit more depth to the story that he was referencing there. But really, I appreciate all of you so much for joining us this evening. I know we've all been doing virtual things for a long time now, and I'm so glad that you joined us tonight. We were sorry to miss you last year, and we just really want to share the Duke Forest story with all of you, especially at this momentous occasion of its 90th anniversary. So I know that I'm speaking to the choir when I say that the Duke Forest is exceptional in its role as a living laboratory and outdoor classroom for Duke and the greater academic community since 1931, in its contributions to scientific discoveries, from understanding how a forest is reborn after agricultural abandonment to learning about forest responses to climate change, in its offering of habitats that are a home and refuge for animals, plants, trees, and more in this rapidly growing region, and in the range of benefits it provides: social benefits, ecological benefits, financial benefits, and to a wide-reaching audience, from Duke students and faculty to neighbors and local governments. So again, thank you for joining me to appreciate the Duke Forest and its remarkable endurance as a research, teaching, forestry, and conservation resource. I hope to share with you the forest's origin story, how it connects to who we are today, where we are going in the future, and why the Duke Forest remains an integral part of the Duke DNA. So tonight, I'll just provide a snapshot of the Duke Forest landscape over the last 90 years. But I want to take a moment to recognize that humans have been interacting with this forest for over 12,000 years. And there remains tremendous opportunity to continue discovering this human history, and especially those stories that have been less well known or that have gone untold, in order to respect and learn from them. So in honor of that human presence that shaped the Duke Forest, I'd like to begin with an audio recording of Nicholas School faculty member and Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Dr. Nicolette Cagle, reading an excerpt from the land acknowledgement she produced for the Duke Forest. And you can find the complete document on our website. But for now, let's give this excerpt a listen together.
As Gould 1992 acknowledges, there is not a university in this country that is not built on what was once native land. That is true for Duke University and its Duke Forest land holdings. We would like to acknowledge, honor, and respect the diverse history of Indigenous peoples in North Carolina and across the settler states. We would also like to recognize their continuing connections to land, water, and culture, and pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. In addition, we acknowledge the overlapping histories of this land, including past violence and ongoing harm produced by the legacy of racialized slavery and oppression. We know of at least 4 sites where slavery was practiced on what is now considered Duke Forest land, including the Alexander Hogan Plantation in the Blackwood Division, the Robeson Mill and Barbie property in the Corstian Division, and the Couch property in the Durham Division.
Thank you all for taking the time to listen to this with me. I hope it gives you some food for thought, and we're excited that we'll be sharing more with you in the next year about a project we're involved in with a multidisciplinary group from across Duke to unearth the Duke Forest. So more on that soon. But now let me orient you to our landscape of today. Here's a very simple map. You'll see West Campus in blue on the right side, and all those large green areas to the west are present-day divisions of the Duke Forest. And I'll ask you to note the Durham, Corstian, and Hillsborough divisions. You'll hear me mention these in the next few slides. So now let's get into, where did it all begin? How did Duke come to have a 7,100 acre teaching and research forest? Let's pick up the story of this land at the transformation of Trinity College into Duke University. In 1924, the university was officially named for the generous Duke family. And under the direction of James B. Duke and then Trinity College President Pugh, they began purchasing nearby land to build a campus that would be home to a world premier university. And by 1929, they had purchased almost 8,000 acres of land. Now, 8,000 acres is a lot of land. Neither the Dukes nor the university administration intended to build a campus this large. So besides campus expansion, what were their motivations and why was so much land available? Herein lies several interesting and intersecting stories that ultimately secured the birth of the Duke Forest. See, the Dukes, being the incredibly successful industrialists they were, they knew that creating and controlling access to the campus in the form of roads and railways would be important. So they pursued the acquisition of land to build a road that linked existing major roadways. This connector is what we now know as Highway 751 or Academy Road closer to campus, and the land surrounding it became the core of what is now the forest's largest division, the Durham Division. So access, that was a primary driver. Now by the 1920s, the Dukes had been involved in the hydroelectric power industry for 20 years. So when they learned of a nearby creek that had provided power for several gristmill sites in the 1800s, Duke directed the acquisition of the land surrounding it. Now, the power potential never materialized, but the land became the core of what is now the forest's second largest division, the Corstian Division. And the Corstian Division protects several miles of New Hope Creek, a major tributary to an important drinking water source, the Jordan Lake Reservoir. It also has great cultural value as relics of the past, old dams and mill sites, house foundations, family and enslaved people cemeteries point to the area's importance during early European settlement and make it a rich destination for historians and scientists alike. Now, in the pursuit to build this new campus in the Tudor Gothic style that Duke is now so famous for, they needed stone and lots of it. And they had looked to all the major quarries in the north, while a smaller effort to look at rock in North Carolina was undertaken. And it just so happened that in the possession of the state geologist's office was a specimen of volcanic stone from an abandoned quarry near Hillsborough. And this stone had these beautiful hues of blue, yellow, green, gray, black, and brown. Many of you are probably picturing this stone right now and can recognize it. Besides its unique aesthetic, this stone would be significantly cheaper than stone from the north. So Duke immediately ordered purchase of this quarry and the land around it. And this became our Hillsborough Division, which also protects a mile of Eno River frontage and provides other important protected water sources. So the access, the power, the raw materials, they built this beautiful, iconic campus, this university in the forest. But we have to get back to our other question now. Why was so much land available? Well, 19th century farming practices had resulted in soil erosion and nutrient loss so severe that farmers had to abandon unproductive fields and clear new land until they simply ran out of arable land. By the early 20th century, many families began leaving their farms to find work in the city's tobacco and textile mills. So when President Pugh and his agents went searching for land, it was this glut of degraded farmland and interspersed woodlots that he was able to secure. Signs of the land's agricultural past, erosion gullies, old field furrows, they're still visible in the forest today. Now, this type of land use was not unique to North Carolina. Indeed, much of the American South looked like the land Duke now owned. Abandoned old farm fields being overtaken by pine trees and interspersed woodlots from which the best trees had been removed. So as President Pugh contemplated the future of this land, he recognized the great need for a forest that offered demonstration and experimentation in the practice of Southern forestry that would serve as an example for how to restore the productivity of the land. Now, being a Harvard graduate, he was familiar with the Harvard forest, and he thought he could use a similar model at Duke. Now entered Dr. Clarence Corstian, who was recruited from the US Forest Service by President Pugh, and he combined Pugh's experience with the Harvard forest with his own from the Yale forest, where he had received his PhD, to craft the Duke Forest Teaching and Research Laboratory. It was officially established in 1931 when Pugh put almost 5,000 acres under the care of Dr. Corstian, the first official director of the Duke Forest, and 7 years later, the founding dean of the first graduate school of forestry in the South. Now here begin the overlapping legacies of research, teaching, forestry, and conservation in the Duke Forest. Under Korstian, early management of the forest complemented the School of Forestry's mission to advance graduate forestry education in the South. Korstian, his colleagues, and students began to diligently study how forest regrowth occurred after a disturbance such as agriculture. And with the help of local workers and the Soil Conservation Service, actively replanted large areas to understand trees as the new crop of the South. And now this is really the start of that scientific legacy of the Duke Forest. Eventually, observations from study plots established by Korstian and other faculty members contributed to the now well-known concept of old field succession and provided much needed insight into forestry practices for the growing pine forests of the South. Now, in the 1970s, when these plots were rediscovered by Nicholas School founding dean, Dr. Norm Christensen, and his colleague, Dr. Bob Peet from UNC Chapel Hill, a new era of understanding forest change and the processes driving those changes began. These plots continue to shape our understanding of Southern Piedmont forests. And with other long-term plots established in the Duke Forest by internationally recognized scholars, such as Nicholas School's Dr. Jim Clark, the Duke Forest is revealing that we should expect the unexpected as forests adapt to changing local and global conditions. Now today, the legacy of the forest origins in research, teaching, conservation, and forestry remains strong, but in new ways. As time passed, academic uses of the forest broadened beyond the study of trees to encompass a variety of disciplines in the natural and environmental sciences, though those trees are still incredibly valuable research subjects. Nicholas School professors Emily Bernhardt and Jim Heffernan, with colleagues and students at the Duke River Center, in the top left here you can see, they instrument streams like New Hope Creek as part of a national effort to better understand streams as dynamic energy systems so that we can better assess how these environments are responding and adapting to climate change. In the top right here, you see Pratt School of Engineering professor Steve Kummer, who uses the Duke Forest as a site to study electromagnetic radiation, lightning, and sprites in the furthest reaches of our atmosphere. And this lower picture here represents Professor Kathleen Donahue from the biology department's plots, where she's taking advantage of open field locations to establish long-term plots of a model species that she and her students use to understand how plants are genetically adapting to changing environmental conditions. And of course, what began as Duke School of Forestry eventually merged with the Marine Lab and then finally the Department of Geology to become what is now known as the Nicholas School of the Environment, where students receive PhDs, professional master's degrees, and undergraduate degrees in focal areas of which forestry is one of many. Now, similarly, the Office of the Duke Forest, the department I oversee that's responsible for the forest, it now stands alone, an indication that much like the Sarah P. Duke Gardens, the forest is a university-wide asset, providing a variety of benefits to students, staff, faculty, and our broader community. But because of our origins, we are thankfully and gratefully housed with the Nicholas School, and we continue to work very closely with their staff, faculty, and students in a variety of ways. So let me tell you now a little bit more about what our mission and management look like today. The heart of the forest mission remains teaching and research. And one of our primary roles as the Office of the Duke Forest is to facilitate the development and implementation of such projects. This support has contributed to national and international recognition of the Duke Forest as a destination for scientific study. What I'm showing here on this slide is the largest and most famous experiment ever conducted on the forest, the Forest Atmosphere Carbon Transfer and Storage, or FACS-1 experiment. It was designed to simulate rising atmospheric carbon dioxide under otherwise natural conditions. And the purpose was to understand the effect of elevated concentrations of carbon dioxide on forest growth and function. Duke Nicholas School professors Ram Oren, Bill Schlesinger, Dan Richter, Emily Bernhardt, and more led this project, but over 260 researchers worldwide participated. Major findings showed that in enriched carbon dioxide plots, trees grew faster. However, that growth was eventually limited by nutrient availability. Also, poison ivy vines became more potent, which is not good news for many of us. And I'll just mention here that studies continue to be published to this day that take advantage of data collected during this study, and more recently, data collected from the decomposing logs harvested at the completion of this study. Now, teaching. While we host students from Duke and other universities every year, the K-12 community also gets involved. Pictured here is a student from the Environmental Sciences Summer Camp, led by Nicholas School lecturer, Dr. Nikki Cagle. The Environmental Sciences Summer Camp is a partnership with Durham Public Schools, and it offers talented high school students from diverse cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds an opportunity to participate in a 2-week intensive environmental program at Duke. And much of that time is spent in the Duke Forest. Now, while our office still focuses much attention on teaching and research, we also have other important objectives with far-reaching benefits. These include sustainably managing resources for timber production, forest health, water quality, and wildlife habitat. Many of those areas that grew up or were replanted in pine after agricultural abandonment have provided a renewable source of revenue for forest operations. Now, in the rapidly developing Triangle region, the value of the forest role in protecting rare species, unique ecosystems, and historical sites cannot be overstated. The forest supports over 1,200 acres of communities of trees, plants, and animals that are no longer readily found in other places because of our development patterns. And the state of North Carolina, through the Natural Heritage Program, has deemed these places important for protecting our state's biodiversity. Now, it might surprise you to know that the forest is home to a site listed on the National Historic Register, that Alexander Hogan plantation that you heard referred to in the land acknowledgement. This is an important archaeological site for 19th century plantation life. Now, beyond our formal teaching, providing more informal education and outreach for the Duke and public community to learn more about natural resources, forest management, and importantly, to connect with science that's happening on the ground, it's an important priority of the Duke Forest. And certainly, last but not least, the forest offers recreational and aesthetic amenities to the community. Since 1931, you can hike, bike, jog, walk, birdwatch, fish, picnic, and much more on the 30+ miles of road and 10+ miles of trail in the Duke Forest. Even in the 1930s, Corstian recognized a disconnect between people and nature and always thought it should be open to the public. Now, we've mentioned the pandemic just briefly tonight, but I'm going to bring it back in here. It's obviously had an impact on the forest as well. You know, and unfortunately, in what seems to be a growing challenge to manage recreation for us, that still protects the teaching and research and conservation mission. And so for the first time in 2020, we released a recreational impact statement to try to help raise awareness and alert recreational visitors of what was occurring, how it hurts the forest as a teaching and research laboratory, and how they can be part of the solution. And I really think this is a trend that is going to only grow in importance going forward, that all of us that are consuming nature-based recreation as such an important and vibrant part of our lives, that we really have to take up that mantle of responsibility, that we are all stewards of these resources when we're visiting them, and even when we're not visiting them. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't point out my two favorite hikers here, Abby and Emmeline, in case they are watching tonight. I wanted to make sure. These are my little girls that love to hike and play hide and seek, especially behind all the big trees in the forest. So now let's talk about from our past to our present, where we are going in the future and how we are forging ahead. In our strategic vision for the forest, it leverages those origins in our present day mission and management to press forward in new and expanding ways. And we currently have a strategic plan, a 5-year plan that is up in 2022. If you're interested, you can find that complete document on our website. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it and where we're going with it. So with research in the forest has always been driven by the changing needs of society. And the opportunity for continued discovery on the Duke Forest, it's only limited by our imagination. We are facilitating more new projects in the arts and humanities and computer and electrical engineering every year. Pratt School of Engineering professor Martin Brooke, others at Duke and beyond are using the Duke Forest and leading teams of students in the research and development of drone technologies that expand our ability to track and monitor environmental issues across the globe. And on the humanities sides, we have local artists like Heather Gordon interpreting archival data from forest light research into inspired geometric designs. Now, teaching. What began as an outdoor laboratory for forestry now serves students of all ages and from across all disciplines. The forest offers space to discover insights not only about our ever-changing world, but also about ourselves and our role in that change. So we're focusing our community engagement programs on those that connect people with science, that help them better understand our natural world, and that we hope empowers them to become stewards of our natural resources. Using citizen science to learn more about wildlife on the Duke Forest, and engaging photographers to appreciate and reveal the seen and unseen in our forest so that we can all love and appreciate it. These are the ways we imagine continuing to forge ahead in engaging and enriching our community. Forestry. As I recently heard Professor Dan Richter say, it's the oldest of the interdisciplinary disciplines. The Duke Forest as a case study for students at the Nicholas School and beyond to become effective leaders at the intersection of forest and natural resources management, conservation, and policy remains critically important. In the forestry operations our office is responsible for produce a sustainable revenue source, and it offers a unique and dwindling opportunity for an urbanizing public to understand firsthand what it means to produce a raw material we all depend on every day, wood, and how that can be done in a responsible way that produces multiple benefits. Now, conservation. Conservation didn't begin as an intentional, explicit objective, but it was inherent to the management of the forest from the beginning. Cultural sites preserved give us opportunity to continue revisiting the past in a way that helps us better honor it and hear all the stories from the land. Protected natural resources in the forest give rise to ecosystem services like clean air and water that serve the region. And we're now actively engaging in the role that the Duke Forest plays beyond its boundaries and within the region by convening and being active collaborators in an effort, a regional effort, to assess landscape level conservation that protects biodiversity and other natural resources for the long term. Without this attention on what's been coined connectivity conservation, we risk turning our protected and managed natural areas, all those places that we love to enjoy nature in, we risk turning them into isolated islands that over time will degrade and will be far less resilient in the face of changes. Now on this map here, you can see Duke Forest in blue in the upper part of the landscape that's been modeled. And so you can start to appreciate the role it might play here. The animals on this slide, the four-toed salamander, the bobcat, and the box turtle, they represent the habitat types that were modeled to produce a landscape plan for wildlife habitat connectivity in the Eno River and New Hope Creek watersheds. That document is accessible through the North Carolina Botanical Gardens website, and you'll be hearing a lot more from the Eno New Hope group and all of our partners in the coming months about how we're working to develop a strategic action plan to try to help protect landscape conservation in our area. Now, as I come to a close, I want to tell you about a new program, Blake's already mentioned this, that we've launched to celebrate the Forest 90th anniversary. Many of you have been friends of the Duke Forest for a long time, and having this official program is a way for us to really demonstrate that it takes a village of stewards to take care of the Duke Forest for the long haul, so it can continue to provide us with all of these amazing benefits. And we believe I believe all of us really want this forest to thrive. We want it to remain an unparalleled Duke resource for research, teaching, forestry, and conservation for the next 90 years and beyond. So please check out our Friends program if you haven't already. Now, I also want to point out a few ways that you can stay connected with us. Our monthly newsletter, which is the second link listed down here, it's a great way to keep up to speed with our mission and management and how that's playing out day to day. And as Blake already mentioned, hot off the press, our beautiful 90th anniversary edition of the log. Many kudos to Blake for that production. It's in the mail to donors now, and e-news subscribers will be getting that digital link very soon to read through that. And so I hope that you all really enjoy that. And finally, I'll just leave you with a reminder that our merch, our 90th anniversary merch, is available. And I also just want to leave you with a sincere thanks for your interest in the Duke Forest and the time that you spent with us tonight. I am happy to answer as many questions as I can. I think we're doing pretty good for time. And with that, I will stop, share, and let Blake let me know what questions we've got.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really wonderful to hear that again. It helps me as an employee of this great forest to remember, you know, what we are working towards and what we're working for. Sometimes we can get bogged down in the font or something of the,
Yes.
of the log, and we forget that it's these wonderful trees and these resources in this history that is really the driving force behind all of it. So thank you for that. We do have some questions. We've actually surprisingly got quite a few questions about research, which is wonderful.
Oh, okay.
So, but I'm going to get to those in a moment. The first one I want to ask is something you already addressed, but I think it helps lead to another thing that would be great to talk about. So Carl Bates, which he's a friend of the forest for quite a while.
Hello, Carl.
Yeah, he asked, did recreational use go much higher during the pandemic? It really seemed that way to me, especially in the Question Loop Trail. And you talked about that a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit about what we are doing as a team in the sort of recreation plan that we've been building for the last year or so.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a great question. And we have certainly lots of anecdotal evidence of just viewing increased visitation ourselves on the trails. We also did collect some data on cars that we counted at gates for a bit of time, but we don't really have a lot of good reference data for that data that we counted, so we can't really do too much with that. But certainly, I think hands down, and recreational resources like Eno River State Park that were actually tracking visitors, saw a 200% increase, like twofold time the amount of visitors. So I'm pretty sure, and I think if you talk to any resource managers around here, they'd tell you exponential use of our natural areas for recreation, including the Duke Forest during the pandemic. And what that did in particular on the Duke Forest, and I don't think the Duke Forest is unique in this, but it really highlighted a lot of rampant, unauthorized activities that were occurring and that were being driven, interestingly, by these geospatial mapping and tracking apps that people were using to either track their biking and running activities or even just to find areas to go. We realized there was this whole world of digital proliferation of representations of what you can do and where you can go in the forest that we had no idea about, and that had nothing to do with our rules and regulations that were in place to make sure teaching and research sites weren't disturbed, to make sure sensitive ecological areas weren't disturbed. So as I mentioned, we put out this recreational impact statement. You know, probably some of the most egregious use were from some mountain bikers that were not only you're only allowed to ride on the graveled roads, and so not only were they riding on our designated foot trails, but they were also actually creating with machinery and their bikes other trails rampantly through the Duke Forest and in natural heritage areas as well. So, you know, all this helped us really in a way where we think about the recreation as being this ancillary benefit of the Duke Forest that we make sure is safe and accessible, but we don't necessarily focus a lot of programmatic attention on it. We realized that we actually needed to dedicate focus to recreation management on the Duke Forest, and that we had an opportunity to solidify what our new team's era of recreation looked like for the Duke Forest. So to do that, we really worked on enhancing signage throughout the forest, making sure it was consistent, making sure the signage on the ground, the blue trailblazing on the ground was consistent, making sure our messaging on social media, on our website was consistent. And we started having some outreach with different groups, some of these apps that we knew were driving some unauthorized uses of the forest. In other places where, for example, even well prior to the pandemic, we knew that we had just decades-long history of social trails that had been developed. In some of these places, rather than, this was how I coined it, I said, rather than continuing to fight the tide, which has not succeeded, much like building a seawall usually never works to hold back the ocean, let's actually coax the tide where it's safe for the forest to do so, in places where it's not going to impact research or sensitive ecological areas. So actually in a couple of places, we've actually created a designated and authorized trail where one didn't exist before. And we're hoping to build and develop a field stewards program with some volunteer support, a regular program with regular engagement to help us monitor and really keep our pulse on those and other areas. Because I think what we all recognize is that it's very important for the forest to not become just another thing that we consume every day, that everybody, when they're here, really develop an appreciation for their role in the resource and protecting that resource for the long term and all of these amazing things that it gives to us. So did I miss anything, Blake, that you were thinking about sharing?
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking about also sharing is that these new trails, once completed, will be some information that we're putting into new maps that we will be creating at some point soon. And so, well, our maps, we involve, you know, a lot. And so we'll have to update the signs that are at all the 40 some entrance gates to the forest. And we hope to have a digital version of our maps online at some point, which is a change for us, but it's something that we've been talking about for a long time. We ran a focus group a couple of years ago on it. And so that's exciting, but it will take a little bit of time. Yeah. So Sarah, we've got quite a few more. Two questions I'm excited to ask, which are about the same thing. Gregory Beck, who was a citizen scientist in our HERPS program, asked, are there any upcoming citizen science projects planned for 2022? And an anonymous attendee said, can you speak more about your citizen science projects and how can I get involved?
Yes, awesome. So as Blake mentioned, we are really banking on 2022 being a return to normal for some of our programs, especially our HERP or Herpetofauna Amphibian Reptile Citizen Science Project that Gregory has been a part of. So we hope to get that rolling again with the orientation event in January and getting folks out there starting in March to run the whole season again, March through October. Now, we had offered 1 year, we piloted a phenology citizen science program, which was also great and terrific, but we found we just simply did not have the staff capacity to keep that program going for right now. But we are about to bring on a new program coordinator. Very exciting. We're in the process of our final interviews right now, and certainly not immediately, but I do believe that over time, we will be seeking to grow our citizen science program. As I mentioned, one of the ways we see community engagement unfolding for us is really in helping to connect people with science, and in particular to connect people with science that can help inform our management of this resource and our good stewardship of this resource. And that's really what the HERP Citizen Science Project is doing. It's helping us learn a lot more about the amphibians and reptiles, a quite vulnerable group of animals globally. It's helping us learn a lot more about who's out there on the Duke Forest now, compare that to who used to be out there, and think about if there are management interventions we can take to try to promote those populations over time.
And I would just like to add that this year we had a really exciting thing that happened. We were approached by the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in Raleigh that they had thousands of records of herpetofauna that were on the Duke Forest that were from Professor Joe Bailey, who was a renowned zoologist at Duke. And they were on 3x5 index cards, often handwritten. And they approached us about getting those digitized so that we could use them and so that they are useful data for them at the museum and for us. And thanks to some donor support, we were able to do that. And thank you also to Joe Bailey's children, Patsy and Mick. Thank you for supporting that project and getting that digitized. So now we are including the herpetofauna research from the 70s and 80s with whatever we are pulling in from our new project. So we have a longer story of the natural history of herps on the forest, which is fantastic.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was a great point.
So one of our tried and true volunteers, Ken Pugh, who is a wonderful photographer. And Ken, I'm sorry, I had your picture behind me at one point in this preparations. I used a picture from Paul Travis from this year, another one of our volunteer photographers. But Ken has contacted us a couple times about ash trees, and he's got a question here. Is there any research into tree diseases such as the ash borer going on in the forest?
No,
or
there's not.
Is there, what sort of, and that makes me think, what sort of interventions do we have for the ash borer?
Yeah, so as we all probably are aware by now, the emerald ash borer is causing nearly 100% mortality in our ash trees in the forest and in other places across the region. There is not any active research happening in the forest, and we have not taken any specific intervention to protect our ash trees because on the forest-wide level, that's just not really feasible. I can tell you that interestingly, I've been collecting some data in our inventory plots with our forest supervisor, Tom, recently. We've caught a couple of ash trees that are still alive, but most of them are on their way out or already dead and falling down. Now, certainly the North Carolina Forest Service and also folks at NC State Extension are doing research on for example, the introduction of a parasitoid wasp as a biological control agent for emerald ash borer. I'm not up on all of the latest that's going on there. I'm actually really keen to understand if we can expect another wave to happen at some point, what the pest folks are thinking the future of this invasion might look like. I think there's a bit of an unknown there right now. So it's really interesting to think about, for me, even these ash trees that have survived, will there be another threat coming down the line? And what does that mean? And, I've been thinking a lot about how we're essentially experiencing this local extinction of a forest tree species. And I don't know that we really are appreciating all that much. And I'm not really sure how to contextualize that and what that means for the forest. So that's an excellent question. And maybe we'll learn more about what's going on with that in the future.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Is a question here that's quite pithy and short, but I think it leads to a bigger question. The question is from an anonymous user of how many deer are culled each year. And I think maybe you could just touch on our deer management program itself. And I think we're in the 14th year of that, and it might be interesting to some people that are on the call.
Yes. So, right, we are managing the deer herd population on the Duke Forest to control it, right? We don't have apex predators anymore. Those have been, long extirpated from the region. No cougars and wolves, and obviously coyotes have been moving in from their range in the west, but they're not necessarily having a huge top-down pressure on deer population. So, the way we're doing that is through a controlled herd reduction through bow hunting, mostly bow hunting in 3 of our divisions. The average harvest from the Duke Forest can be anywhere between 50 to 75 deer. When I run the numbers, that's not actually even necessarily quite enough to get us down to what literature says is ecological carrying capacity for deer in this area. But what we are paying attention to is that we can see a downward pressure on the deer population, and that's being held when we do our follow-up deer spotlight surveys in the late winter. So I think that we are confident that the animals that we're removing from the forest, that is having a beneficial impact, that if we can keep that downward pressure, we need to keep on the deer. Otherwise, their herbivory, their browsing of the forest vegetation, essentially completely eliminates and or completely alters the trajectory of forest regrowth in this area. And this is a thing some people should be really thinking about, not just in the Duke Forest, but in all these beautiful natural areas they like to visit, especially those where there's not hunting, and what's happening there and what's the trajectory of those forests in those areas. Our deer management program is a super tightly controlled, administered to the T hunt. Our hunters check in and out with us every day into a 500 square foot grid cell. We know where everybody is at any given moment. They do an excellent job helping us take care of the forest. They do an excellent job of being eyes out there for us. They're usually the ones that encounter poaching or dumping issues before we even get a chance to. So it's actually having the hunters out there on the forest actually provides multiple benefits for us as a staff. Did I miss anything important there, Blake? Anything you'd add?
Well, I just want to say I don't think people understand that often we're working on this almost year round, and you've mentioned a few of those things that we do year round, but this program is not just in the fall for us. It is a year round program, and Beverly Burgess, our administrative assistant, who I know is on the call, she works all year round on this project. And thank you, and it certainly has an impact. But go ahead, there's one.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
So there's been a lot of news headlines lately about COVID-19 being found in white-tailed deer. And so folks have been emailing me about this and like, what do you know about this? And the only thing I can say, I don't know a lot about it. This is really, breaking news for all of us. But super excited to report that just this week had a conversation with a PhD student at NC State that has funding for a 3.5-year project that will investigate deer populations, urban deer, suburban deer, and rural deer in Durham County as reservoirs for COVID-19, and as they're going to investigate other survival characteristics as well. So we're going to have research on this very new, late-breaking topic in this COVID-19 pandemic happening right here in the Duke Forest and in other areas in Durham County. So I just wanted to mention that. Very exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. So Sarah, we have a question from Marcia Engel, which is great to hear from you,
Hi,
Marcia. Glad you joined, and
yes.
It's quite long, so I'm going to try to do my best to summarize.
Yes.
To summarize it, and she certainly says congratulations to Sarah and all of the Duke Forest staff at this milestone. She brings up that our strategic plan says, we want to further reduce the reliance on timber as a revenue source given current age class distributions and future market uncertainties. But she's surprised given Duke University's promise to become a carbon neutral university by 2024. And she's surprised that the strategic plan doesn't say decrease logging to decrease carbon emissions. She said, well, maybe I'll continue reading it. Duke Forest has contributed important data around carbon sequestration by trees of various maturity levels. Is current Duke Forest research not also contributing to the conclusion reached by many researchers that logging forests cannot be considered carbon neutral? And I can repeat that if.
Well, let me respond in a few ways, Blake, and then you tell me if there's more to respond to. So right now there is not active carbon sequestration research going on in the forest. The really big project was that phase 1 FACTS experiment. I think what we think about when we are managing timber on the Duke Forest is that wood is an essential resource. It's a part of our everyday lives. And the way that we grow our wood, which is unique across the South, is into really long-lived old trees, which then contribute to the creation of products that store that carbon for a very, very, very long time. And then what we do essentially, again, is then repeat that cycle and grow more trees that start taking up carbon. And I think it's important to note here that so out of that 7,100 acres of forest, we're really only managing pine production on about 2,300 acres of land. And that represents those areas that were all abandoned agricultural lands that had lost lots of soil, that really don't have an A horizon anymore. That growing these trees actually helped restore the land a bit and start to sequester carbon that had been lost from all of the soil erosion and so forth. And it's those areas that we're keeping in this renewable cycle, essentially, of long-lived wood products. We are not clearing new forests. We're not clearing old hardwood sites or converting hardwood into pine plantation. Those areas we are letting to grow and live on naturally. So it's an interesting question to really think about what is the carbon sink source balance from the Duke Forest. Marcia, honestly, I don't know that there's research on it, but I would bet that the balance is actually still favorable, that we are a sink because of the way we grow our trees, because they go into these long-lived products, because we then grow new trees that sequester carbon, and because we're leaving outside a lot of area of just big old trees, that are putting on carbon, putting lots of carbon into the ground in these extensive, massive root networks. And so my bet would be that we are really a net sink rather than a source. But I think that's a really interesting question. And I have thought about President Price's note about being, a climate change research university and so forth, and what new research that might bring to the forest. We have some master's students now looking at quantification of carbon sequestration on the Duke Forest in a project. But that's the only research project really right now looking at that. Did I cover all of Marcia's points?
I think so. And if
Okay.
not, we can certainly follow up with her.
Yes.
But in the interest of time, we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to leave one of my favorite questions for the end. And it's one that
Okay.
we hadn't mentioned dogs yet. So, or maybe we mentioned them just briefly, but let's mention them now. Jack Bookman, also a friend of the forest
yeah.
for a long
Hey,
time,
Jack.
asked, how would you suggest we should approach people who have unleashed dogs in the
Oh,
forest?
goodness.
Yeah, this is the advice part of the show tonight.
Yes. Oh gosh. I feel like I'm really on the spot. I mean, I think that in the interest of your own safety, you certainly have a right to respectfully ask that somebody leash their dog so that you can enjoy the forest alongside them. And I know that people are highly defensive about it a lot of times. Some people are not, but some people are. And we all know people are particularly on edge these days. So I think if you feel comfortable doing so, and certainly you have the right to in the interest of your own safety, just mentioning, hey, could you put your dog on a leash so we can all enjoy the forest together? Might be a good way to do it. I don't know, Blake, do you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, one of the things I would say, Sarah, and where there may be some change here, and hopefully, is that we are bringing on this new staff member soon, and hopefully this field stewards program, and we don't know what we're going to call it yet. That's the working name. People that will help us outreach and educate to the forest. We're hoping that there will be some component of that which has some bearing on the unleashed dogs scenario in the forest, because we certainly don't like telling people to leash their dogs. We'd rather that we didn't have to have that conversation. We also just don't like picking up poop bags, and that's just a personal thing. But I don't want to end talking about just that, poop bags. Let's see if there's, I think that was a quick answer. So let me see if there's any more questions. Okay. One question this was another anonymous user.
Okay.
And I love this. We'll end the night on this. What has been a project or research highlight for this year?
Oh, well, there's been a couple. We just had some awesome PhD students from the University of Switzerland here, and they were super fun and sweet and gave us Swiss chocolate, and that was awesome.
Wait, hold up. Stop the presses. Gabe, where's the us component of that? I didn't get any.
Okay, Tom and I got Swiss chocolate from the Swiss researchers. But what they were doing was establishing a very small plot of a model plant species, somewhat similar to biology professor Kathleen Donahue's work. They are looking at plants' genetic adaptations to climate change at the edge of their ranges. So they are planting this species here and at several other up in Virginia and some other places too. And they've actually got students here collecting data on their plots while they're in Switzerland, and they'll be back and forth a little bit to take care of those areas. So that's a climate change project that's really interesting. And those Swiss researchers were just so fun and sweet to me, and I wish we had more time with them. I think the work that the Duke River Center continues to do in New Hope Creek is really interesting. Johnny Behrens is a PhD student of Emily Bernhardt's, and Steve Anderson is one of their lab managers. And they're doing some aquatic insect diversity studies using New Hope Creek in the Duke Forest as a control site to information and data they're collecting in urban Durham streams like Ellerby Creek, for example. And so they're trying to understand different impacts on these different types of systems and so forth. That's been an interesting project. I'm trying to think about
maybe just mention the Code Plus project, which was incredible.
Yes, well, let me also mention this one other project that I just helped find paired plots for. So, and this goes back to the pest question we had earlier. So another invasive pest that's a problem, I know we're at time. Spotted lanternfly attacks maple trees and other things. we now have a series of 5 paired plots in the Duke Forest where we are going to, well, not we, our NC State researchers are going to simulate the loss of maple by spotted lanternfly to see how that affects forest processes. So that's really interesting. And yes, the Code Plus project, gosh, a fantastic project with such an incredible team of undergraduate students to get all of our amazing geospatial data online and available to researchers and teachers in a very user-friendly way. And we hope to launch that live very soon. If you get the Duke Forest log, you can read more about that project. But I'll stop here because I know we are a minute over now.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. It's really hard to pick a single highlight. There's always something interesting going on, and so many different angles of how people use this great teaching and research asset. So thank you all for joining us for this 2021 annual gathering. We really hope to be in person next year with you all and eating wine, drinking wine and eating. I'll probably be eating wine, and
we need to eat some wine.
Yeah. So, but we miss seeing all of you, talking to you about the forest. We know you love this place as we do, and are wonderful stewards of it in your own ways. So thank you so much. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your time. We will have a recording of this that's available probably next week, if not sooner. And just remember, there will be a brief survey that pops up right at the end of this. Feel free to respond there. So thank you all so much from our whole team: Tom, Craig, Bev, Sarah, Haley. Who am I missing someone? The new person that we're bringing on soon, which is very exciting for us.
All the trees, all the tractors. We thank you. Thank you so much for logging on tonight. And feel free, if we didn't get to your question and it's a burning question, send it to dukeforest@duke.edu. We are more than happy to respond or dig in further. Marcia, I have some other thoughts on that question you asked me, so feel free to email us. And thank you so much. Have a good night.
Great. Good night, everyone.